We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Zayin Amud Aleph and Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 67a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought the opinion of Rebbe. Rebbe said that when we talk about the fact that a Bas Kohen who commits adultery, that her punishment is Sreifa, Rebbe says that's only in a situation of Tchila, when it is the first, and the Gemara was discussing what exactly does Rebbe mean. And the Gemara says that Rebbe Yosef understands that what Rebbe means to say is like the opinion of Rebbe Meir, that when it comes to a Bas Kohen, she's only going to get the punishment of Sreifa when she commits adultery, if it's the first time she is profaned. But if she marries somebody who is Pasal Allah, she's disqualified from marrying, so then we say she's not going to get Sreifa if she commits adultery. Rather, she will get the punishment of Chenek, which is the standard punishment for situations of adultery. But the issue is that Rebbe, when he said this word Tchila, he brought the pasuk by Nara HaMorasa, and the question is, what's the connection between that pasuk of Nara HaMorasa and what Rebbe is saying, what he's saying by a Bas Kohen? Now, by Nara HaMorasa, there is a concept of Tchila, but that really refers to the fact that when the Nara HaMorasa, when she commits adultery, it's her first act of relations. It's not referring to the fact that it's the first time that she is profaned or nischalal. And so the Gemara says to that, Simona Bi'alma, it's just a siman. It's not exactly the same, but it has something to do with Tchila. Rashi explains, Simona Bi'alma uv'tchilas shum davar hakasam medaber. The pasuk there is talking about the first of something. The tchilas chilol miyahavin. Over here we're talking about tchilas chilol, and so therefore that is a connection. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hamesis, if somebody incites somebody else to worship Avodah Zarah, Zehediot, this is referring to a regular person, V'Hamesis Esahediot. And also we're talking about somebody who incites a regular person to serve Avodah Zarah. Rashi explains Hamesis Zehediot, meaning Mesis Techashvinan Le B'Niskolin, the Mesis that we talk about, that gets skila, that gets stoned for the fact that he incited someone to worship Avodah Zarah, Zehediot Shehesis. This is talking about a regular person who is a Mesis. Avol Navi Shehesis, but let's say you have a prophet who is a Mesis, Eino B'Skila, he doesn't get the punishment of skila, of stoning, Ela B'Chenek, rather he gets the punishment of Chenek, of strangulation, Kedim Mefarish B'Gemara, as is explained in the Gemara. And then the Mishnah said, Hamesis Esahediot, if somebody incites a regular person who diviskila, that's when we say the person gets skila, and that's in contrast Avol Mesis Es Harabim. But let's say somebody incites a public, a large amount of people to do that, to worship Avodah Zarah. Could go in Ir Hanidachas, for example, and Ir Hanidachas Bechenek, so then the punishment would be Chenek, it would be strangulation. Kedim Mefarish B'Gemara, as the Gemara explains. And the Mishnah continues, Amar Yesh Yira b'makom ploni. Let's say a person says there's an idol in such and such a place. Kach ocheles, kach shosa. This is what it eats. This is what it drinks. Kach metiva, kach maria. This is what it does that's good. This is what it does that's bad to those who deserve bad. Kol chayve misos shebatorah. And the Mishnah continues, all chayve misos shebatorah ein machminen alein. We don't hide witnesses in those situations. Chutz mizu, except for this. Meaning, when it comes to a mesis, we are willing even to hide witnesses in order to see the person, to catch the person. We don't do that by other chayve misos, but we do that when it comes to a mesis. Amar l'shnayim. So let's say the person is talking to two people. He's inciting two people to worship Avodah Zarah. Hein edav, so they can be the witnesses against him. Umevian oso lebezin, they bring him to court. V'soklan oso, and then they stone him. Amar le'echa. Now let's say he's saying this to one person, so that's not enough to be two witnesses. So who Omer? So what he can say is as follows: Yesh li chaveirim rotzim bekach. I have friends that want this. And imhaya orim, and let's say the person is smart, ve'eno yachol adaber b'fneim, and he's not able to make him speak in front of more than one person. Let's say the person who's the mesis realizes he doesn't want to do this to more than one person at a time, because then there'll be witnesses. So that's when we can hide the witnesses. Machminin lo edem achore hageder. We can hide the witnesses behind the fence. Vu omer lo, and then he'll say to him, Emor masha marta biyichud, go tell me what you just told me before alone. V'halo omer lo, and then he'll tell him that. Vu omer lo, and then he responds and says, Heich naniach es Elokeinu shebashamayim. How can we leave our God in heaven? V'nelech v'navod eitzim v'yavonim, and go and serve wood and stone. Im choserbon, if at that point in time the mesis retracts, he changes his mind, hareza mutav, then everything is good. V'yamamar, but if he says kachi chovaseinu, this is what our obligation is, to serve this idol. Kachi yafalanu, this is going to be good for us. So then ha'omden me'achore hageder, then those who are standing behind the fence, mevian oso lebezin, they bring him to court, v'soklan oso, and then they stone him. Ha'omer evod elech v'yevod, nelech v'navod, ezbach elech v'ezbach, nelech v'nizbach. Somebody says, I'm going going to serve. Somebody says, I'm going to go and serve. Let's go and serve. I'm going to sacrifice to an avodah zarah. I'm going to go and sacrifice. Let's go and sacrifice. Aktir, I'm going to burn to avodah zarah. Elech v'aktir, I'm going to go and burn to avodah zarah. Nelech v'naktir, let's go and burn to avodah zarah. Anasech, I'm going to pour libations for the avodah zarah. Elech v'anasech, I'm going to go and pour libations. Nelech v'anasech, let's go and pour libations. Eshtachava, I'm going to bow. Elech v'eshtachava, I'll go and bow. Nelech v'neshtachava, let's go and bow. These are all examples of situations of mesis. And the Gemara says, ha-mesis, again, the person who is the mesis is zehedyot. That refers to a hedyot. It's a regular person who's inciting others to worship avodah zarah. And so the Gemara makes an inference. Taima de hedyot. The reason why we say the punishment is stoning is because he's a regular person. Hanavi, but if he would be a prophet that's telling people to worship avodah zarah, bechenek, then the punishment would be strangulation, as Rashi mentioned. V'ha-mesis es ha-hedyot. And then it says that somebody incites a regular person. Taima de yachad. The reason is just because it's one person. Harabim, but if he incites many people, which again is a situation of an ir hanidachas, bechenek. So then the punishment is strangulation. We can infer that that is what the Tana of the Mishnah holds. And so the Gemara says, Masnisin Moni Rabbi Shimoni. Who's the author of our Mishnah? It's Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya, because we learned in a Braisa, Navi Shehidiach Beskila. If you have a Navi that convinces others to worship avodah zarah, the punishment is going to be skila. That is not like our Mishnah, because we just inferred from our Mishnah that the Navi is bechenek. Rabbi Shimon Omer bechenek. Rabbi Shimon says bechenek, and so therefore again Rabbi Shimon is consistent with our Mishnah. Madichei ir hanidachas beskila. Those who convince the people of an ir hanidachas to worship avodah zarah, they get skila. Again, that would not be like our Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer bechenek. Rabbi Shimon says the punishment would be chenek. Again, consistent with our Mishnah. But the Gemara continues, Ema Seifa, but now let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Hamediach zehaomer neilech v'navod, the person says, let us go and serve, avodas kochavim, let us go and serve avodah zarah. V'yomer Rav Yehuda Marav, and Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Madichei ir hanidachas shanu, what's being taught over here is Madichei ir hanidachas. The end of the Mishnah that's using the plural is talking about a situation of ir hanidachas, ason l'Rabbanan, and that actually follows the Rabbanan, because at the end of the Mishnah, what we're essentially saying is that by the Madichei ir hanidachas, the punishment is skila, the punishment is stoning. And we just said that really our Mishnah, the beginning of our Mishnah at least, is actually following Rabbi Shimon, that Madichei ir hanidachas, the punishment is chenek. And so the Gemara therefore asks, Reisha Rabbi Shimon v'Sefer Rabbanan, is the beginning of the Mishnah Rabbi Shimon, and the end of the Mishnah is the Rabbanan. Which one is it when it comes to Madichei ir hanidachas? Do they get chenek or do they get skila? And the Gemara continues, Ravina Amar Ravina says, Kula Rabbanan hi. Actually, the entire Mishnah is the Rabbanan. Velozu afzu katani. And actually, the way to learn the Mishnah is lozu afzu, meaning according to Ravina, when the Mishnah at the beginning says a situation where it's just a yachid gets, in a situation of a yachid that it's skila, then we say at the end of the Mishnah, not only in a situation of a yachid do we say the punishment is skila, but even when we're talking about Madichei ir hanidachas, even when it's a rabbim, when it's a public, still the punishment is skila. That's how you should actually learn the Mishnah, that it's all following the sheet of the Rabbanan. Rav Papa says, Ki katani mesis zehediot lachmon. Rav Papa says that when it says that the mesis is zehediot, when we make that inference that we're talking about hediot, that is really lachmona. That's really for this halacha in terms of hiding witnesses. The Tanya, as we learned in a braisu, shar kol chayvei misas shebetorah, when it comes to all other chayvei misas, those who are liable to the death penalty in the Torah, ein machminin aleim. Again, we don't hide witnesses for them. Chutz mizu, except for this situation. Ketzad osin lo madlikin lo es haner bebayis hapnimi. What do we do with him? We light a candle in the inner house. Umoshivin lo edim bebayis chitzar, and then in the outer house, that's where we have the witnesses. Kadesha yuhein roan oso, so that they can see him. Vishoman eskolo, and they can hear him. Vuei no roa osan, but he can't see them. V'halo omer lo, and the other person says to him, Emor masha martali biyichud. Tell me what you told me when we were alone. V'omer lo, and he says to him what he said. V'halo omer lo, and the other one says again, Heich naniach es Elokeinu Shamayim, how do we leave our God in heaven? V'navod avodas kochavim, that we should serve avodah zarah. Im chozer bo mutav, if he retracts, good. V'imamar kach yichovasenu, but if he says this is our obligation, v'kach yafulanu, this is good for us. Ha'edim sheshomen mibachutz, then the witnesses who hear from outside, mevino so lebezin v'soklano, so they bring him to court and they stone him. And Rashi explains, Ravina Amar Garas, the proper text of the Gemara is Ravina Amar, that's what we have in our Gemara. V'lo Garsinan Amar Ravina. Rashi says you should not have the girsa of Amar Ravina, it specifically should be Ravina Amar. Why? De'iu v'Rav Papa lo pligi, because actually Ravina's answer to the question, and Rav Papa's answer to the question, they're actually not arguing. If you have Ravina Amar, then that would indicate that Ravina is not actually arguing with Rav Papa. Elamar Matar Etzchada, Mar Matar Etzchada, one's giving one answer, one's giving another answer, v'lo pligi, and they're not arguing. To habitray mili ukimna l'reisha krebi Shimon v'yasu hanacham oroi l'trutza karabonan. Because the way Rashi understands is that in two respects we're really saying that the beginning of the Mishnah is like Rabbi Shimon, and these Amoroim are coming and saying that really we have to explain the Mishnah like the Rabbanan. Again, the original question of the Gemara was that the beginning of the Mishnah seems to be like Rabbi Shimon, and the end of the Mishnah seems to be like the Rabbanan, and Rashi is now saying that Ravina and Rav Papa essentially are answering the same. They're both saying that it's all according to the Rabbanan, but there was really a question in two respects. Here's the explanation. Ravina tirtza l'chad. Ravina is answering one part of this. V'yamarni says, Reisha nami Rabbanan, that the beginning of the Mishnah is also the Rabbanan. V'hamesis es hahedyot, and when it says that the person incites the hedyot, which is the individual, lav l'meute mesis es harab maser. Ravina is saying it's not excluding if he would incite the public, like in irani dachas. Ela tarvayu tana luhu, but both are counted. Tana reisha mesis es hayachid. The beginning of the Mishnah is saying if you do an individual, the punishment is skila. V'hadar tana seifa hamediach, and then at the end of the Mishnah we talk about mediach, meaning again irani dachas with the public. Zeha omer l'rabim, that's somebody who says to the public, Neilech v'navod avodas kochav. Let us go and serve avodah zara. V'lozu afsu katani. It's again a lozu afsu. Not only here is it skila, also over there. Klomari kashalach listening meses harabim. Meaning, if you're going to ask, why don't we just have the case of the public? V'lo listening meses hayachid, then you don't need the individual. Ta'apshida dekulo modu ba'adav skila, because everybody agrees in that case that the skila. Or chalatana lemisni hachi. It's normal for the Tana to teach in this fashion. Tana milsa bereisha depshitale. Sometimes you teach the first thing that's obvious. V'hadar tani ribusa, and then you say a chiddush. V'lo zu demeses yachid bilvad beskila. Not only in this case of a yachid is it skila, ela avzu demeses rabim beskila. So too by the rabbim udalok Rabbi Shimon, and it would not be like Rabbi Shimon, and that's what Ravina is addressing. Rav Papa asa afle terutze lidekotani hameses zehedyot. Now Rav Papa, he's going on the part of the Mishnah that said that the person doing the inciting is a hedyot, which we initially said means to exclude a navi, and so now Rav Papa is saying lav lemuute navi hameses katani. The word meses over here is not to exclude a navi. Elakol hamesisim kari hedyotos. Rav Papa is explaining that the Mishnah means to say all mesisim are called hedyotos. They're referred to as hedyotos mishum hachmana, because of this idea of hiding the person, of hiding the witnesses. Kolomar meses hedyot v'shotahu. What he's really saying is that a meses is a hedyot is like a simpleton, is somebody who doesn't understand. He's a shot, he's an imbecile. Umidas hakalin noeg bo shemekilin b'chayev, and we treat him very lightly. We treat his life in a very light manner. Shakol chayve miso strichin hasra, because when it comes to all people who are liable to the death penalty, really you need a warning. V'zeh nerag b'hachmana. But this individual is able to be killed even by hiding the witnesses. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. V'chein asu leven satada belud. This is also what they did to Ben Satada belud. He was a mesis, and they convicted him in this fashion by hiding witnesses. V'talu be'erev ha-Pesach, and they hung him on Erev Pesach. And the Gemara says Ben Satada, Ben Pandira. Why is he called Ben Satada, the son of Satada? He's actually the son of Pandira. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda says, Baal Satada, the husband in this situation, his name was Satada, but Boel Pandira, but it was a situation of adultery, and the Boel, the person she actually had relations with, was Pandira. But the Gemara still asks, Baal Papas ben Yehuda, it's not true. The husband actually, his name was Papas ben Yehuda, and so the Gemara says, Ela Ema, rather what you should say is Imo Satada, that his mother was Satada, he was called Ben Satada, named for his mother. But the Gemara still says, Imo Miriam Megadla Neshaya Havai, but the mother actually was Miriam, who braided the hair of the women, and so the Gemara says it was just a nickname, Keda Amri bePumbedisa, like they say in Pumbedisa, Sitos Dami Bala, she strayed from her husband, that's why she was called Satada. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, HaMediach Zeh Omer Neilech V'navod Avodas Kochavim. What's a Mediach? That's somebody who says, let us go and worship Avodah Zarah. HaMechashef, when I'm talking about a Mechashef, which refers to witchcraft, Ha'osem Maisa Chayev, if somebody actually does an action of Mechashef, he is Chayev, V'lo Ha'ochez Esoinayim, but not somebody who deceives the eyes. Rabbi Akiva Omer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva says in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, Shnayim Loktin Kishuin, if two people are collecting cucumbers, Echad locate Pater, echad loket chayiv. One can be doing it in his pater. We're talking here about using some kind of witchcraft, and one can be doing that and he can be chayiv. And the idea is as follows: ha'osa ma'isa chayiv. If somebody does it with an action, he's liable. But ha'ochez eswainayim pater. But if he's just deceiving the eyes, so then he's exempt. And Rashi explains, "Hamediach ze ha'omer begemara muki lo b'mediach ir hanidachas." The Gemara is going to say that this Mishnah right here is talking about an ir hanidachas. Ha'osa ma'isa mamish b'skila. Again, if somebody actually does the action of mechash, if he gets skila, he's stoned. V'lo ha'ochez eswainayim, but not someone who deceives the eyes, meaning mara lebrios ki ilu hu'osa. He makes it look like he's doing something. V'yeino osa klum, but he's actually not doing anything. Shnayim malaktim kishun. If two people are gathering cucumbers, b'mechashvos, using this kind of witchcraft lefonenu in front of us. Echad mehen locate, one is collecting, v'chayiv and is chayiv. V'chaveru locate upater, and you can have the friend is doing the same thing, but is pater, as the Mishnah explains. Ha'osa ma'is, if he's doing an action, shaisakan sadek kishuan, you have here a field of cucumbers, v'lokta mamish b'chshafim, and he collects them together using this kind of witchcraft. Chayiv is chayiv, but ochez asoinayim. But if he just deceives, he deceives the eyes. Mara lanu ki ilu hiskapsu kulam b'makam echad. He makes it look like he gathered them all in one place, but v'akishuan lo zazin mimekomim, but they actually did not move from their place, so then pater, in that situation he's pater, he will be exempt. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Madiche ir hanidachas shanukan. Again, the Mishnah here, when it's talking about Madiach, it's talking about an ir hanidachas. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Hamechashev zeosa ma'isa." Again, a person who does witchcraft, that's doing an action. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, "Mechashefa echad haish ve'echad ha'isha." When there's a warning against a mechashefa, that applies whether we're talking about a man or a woman. A man could also be considered using witchcraft. The Gemara says, "Im kain ma Talmud lomer mechashefa." The Brisa says, if so, why does it say mechashefa as if it's a female? Because generally speaking, it's women that are involved in kshafim, are involved in this kind of witchcraft. And the Gemara continues, the Brisa continues, Misasan Bames. So what death penalty in particular does a mechashev get? Rabbi Yosei Aglili Omer Nemar Kan Mechashev lo Sichya, V'Nemar Lahalan lo Sichaya Kol Neshama. It says over here that a mechashefa shouldn't live, and it uses the same language by lo Sichaya Kol Neshama. It's talking about the people of Canaan. Malahalan B'Sayif, just like over there, it's death by the sword. Afkan B'Sayif. So too by mechashefa, according to Rabbi Yosei Aglili, it's death by the sword. Rabbi Kiva says Nemar Kan mechashefa lo sichi. It says over here that a mechashefa shouldn't live. V'nemar lahalan im behema im ish lo yichi. And it says over there, if it's an animal or a man, this is by Har Sinai. Person approaches Har Sinai, they shouldn't live. Ma'alahalan b'skila, just like over there, it's with the punishment of stoning. Afkan b'skila. So too over here, it's the punishment of stoning. Amar lo Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says to him, Ani danti lo sechaya mi lo sechaya. I'm learning. This is Rabbi Yossi Aglili responding. I'm learning lo sechaya from lo sechaya. It's the same word. I'm learning the same word, one from the other. But you're learning mechashefa lo sichya. You're learning that from a pasuk that doesn't say the word sechaya. It says yichya. It says it with a yud in behema imish lo yichya. How can you make that limud? Amar lo Rabbi Kiva. So Rabbi Kiva says to him, Ani dante Yisrael mi Yisrael. But I'm learning a situation of Jewish people from Jewish people. Sheriba b'hanakasa misas harbe. And there you find many different kind of death penalties when it comes to Jewish people. Yisrael me'ovdei kochavim. But you're learning this situation of mechashefa by Jewish people from something that involved ovdei kochavim, a death penalty by idol worshippers. But shelo riba b'hanakasav ella. But over there, we don't find the pasuk has many different kind of death penalties when it comes to non-Jews. We find that in general, the only death penalty that they have is sayif, so you shouldn't be learning from there. And Rashi explains, mechashefa echad ish ve'echad isha, when it talks about a mechashefa that really can be a man or a woman, tahagabe ovi yidoni the mechashvim heim lo chilek bein ish lisha, because by ov and yidoni, which is also a kind of kishuf, there's no difference between man and woman. Dechsiv isha isha, it says over there man or woman. Lo sechaya kol neshama b'sheva umos, ksiv, again by the 7 nations of Canaan, it says lo sechaya kol neshama. Ma'alahalan b'sayif, just like over there, it's death by the sword. Dechsiv b'sichon v'yog v'yakeu Yisrael l'fi charv. It says by sichon and og that they use the sword. And then we also can learn Malahalan b'Sinai. The other place to learn from is Har Sinai, where it says b'skila. It says the punishment is stoning. Dechsiv kisakol yisakel o yaro yirad. That's what it says in the pasuk. It refers to stoning. And Rashi continues, Shariba b'hanakasa misas harbi. But when it comes to the situation Har Sinai by Jewish people, there's many possible death penalties. Umatzino b'Sinai shenivchra b'hen skila. And yet we find by Har Sinai that skila was chosen, so we should learn from there. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Zayin Amid Beis.